this reality of inequality, we always point at the whites. Whites are the ones who rape their children. Incest is a white thing. But we've been doing it for millennia. It's common. It's linked to the privatization of females and of children. If you as an old man can sell your little girl who is 8 years old, in fact when she's born, there's a rich old bugger next door, and you're struggling because of the class inequalities, which by the way are endemic to Africa. They didn't come with colonialism. That romance, ubuntu, loving each other. No. No. The history is that Africa is the first continent where you have class differentiation. Because we are the oldest of the human societies. Africa is the first continent where women are exchanged. Because we are the oldest. We have the oldest civilizations. You can't have an omelette without breaking the eggs. Don't claim that we are the oldest civilizations and then you deny that we have the oldest feudalisms, that we have the oldest slaving societies, because the two go together. So marital rape, which is one of the key issues that feminists are advocating against and pushing in the courts, that this must be recognized as one of the most fundamental and the most severe and the most hidden, one of the most taboo issues in our societies. It goes to the heart of male power. You see, because men can't stop us from going to school, but they did for a long time. They would educate the male because they would claim that the female is going to go to the man's house. You see, mobility. Women couldn't just move out of the domestic arena into the public. And even now, when we move into the public, we are called loud women, out of control women. Yeah, she needs to be. That's what she needs. Yeah, a good one. Yeah, we are telela lumfazlo. You see, got big mouths, talks too much. She needs to be handled. And you know all the expressions, right? Or she's a bitch, which means retrieving that narrative that says women are sexually dangerous to males. And as I said earlier, even to maul and mutilate female bodies, to mutilate the vaginas of women, the clitorises, because sexual pleasure is considered a male preserve, and to have pleasure as a female shows kuti uyingwababane vele wena. Yeah. Ure. You see, the language is loaded with all these expressions that demonize and vilify women. And when you're in the public, if you're smart and successful, you must have been sleeping with men in the company to get up to the top. They even call it bottom power. So all these discourses that seek to push women back into the private, so that women can become these decent women who are owned and controlled and quiet, don't challenge the status quo. So marital rape, the backlash, when men resist progress, transformation, women's freedoms, it's called the backlash. And the backlash against marital rape is one of the fiercest. It's similar to homosexuality and women's choice to be in sexual relationships with other women or to move between women and men. I was telling a friend the other day that actually bisexuals are the most natural. Heterosexuals are the most unnatural. And bisexuals are the most natural. If we're going to use the word natural, that is occurring in nature. That's what the word means, right? Why? Because bisexuals reflect what every human being is born with. We're born with the capacity to be male or female. Our hormonal systems define us as female or as males in terms of the reproduction of the species. It's just a coincidence. It's a chromosomic thing. all right? It's directly linked to breeding and survival of the species. So, but many humans are born with both the genitalia of a male and a female. It's called intersex. They used to be called hermaphrodites. And when a child was born like that, it was either killed in the pre societies, yeah? Or now, the parents quickly ask the doctor to cut off the part that looks smaller than the other one. So if the testicles and the penis are more developed than the vagina, they close up the vagina. And they allow, and they put the child on steroids to develop the male genitalia. If the vagina is more prominent than the male genitals, they remove those. This is a violation of this human being's bodily integrity. It's not your body. Don't touch it. Don't cut it. Don't touch it. It's not yours. You've got your own. Why do you want to cut and massage and squeeze? And it's not yours. It belongs to this human being who arrives with a complete integrity. Don't hit that child. That's violence. Hi, but no, man, I'm discipline. Yeah, child must be disciplined. You're a fascist. You're a fascist. You're authoritarian, and you're a fascist. You're using violence against another human being because the human being can't defend themselves. You see, you're threatened by a helpless little creature that can't defend itself. So marital rape goes to the core of patriarchal power and female submissiveness. Because when you go into marriage, which is one of the most powerful rituals that you can enter into as a female, and females are told from day one that this is what you have to do. This is the most important thing you have to do, isn't it? Can't, if you're like Pat McFadden, daughter. What kind of a woman is that? Something wrong there. Very wrong. You see, if she had a husband, she wouldn't be talking like this. You see? So marriage, when the state is developing in human society, and men are creating these institutions, when they create the legal institutions, they also put rituals in there that consolidate their power over women. Marriage is a ritual. It's not an institution. Because you can come in and out of it. People say it's an institution. No, it's not. An institution is a permanent system through which power travels. An institution is actually the ideological expression of material infrastructures of power. When you say Tamale is an institution located in UNISA, you see. But marriage is a ritual that can be undone, or it can be extended. So you have polygamy. You know, marrying a lot of very productive bodies, you see. But marriage fundamentally, and a lot of women don't know this, is a contract of property between men and the state. That is why only men can marry. That is why all these heterosexuals are fighting against gay marriage and lesbian marriage. Because marriage is one of the first contracts that humans invent around the privatization of this female body. You see how I always go back to that moment of privatization. So when you marry, you are married by. You're not married with. It's not a partnership. It's a contract of property. And what is the most dramatic expression of that property is that a man can rape you as long as he's married. It's not rape. As long as you're his wife, they'll tell you straight. I loboled you so that I could have sex when I wanted. Right, guys? I'm not talking about the negotiated settlements that you do with your partner. I'm talking about the core. The presumption that she's your wife so you can have access to her body when you want. And large numbers of femicide, the killing of women because they are women, reflect women's resistance to marital rape. Large numbers of married women are killed because they resist the assumption of certain privileges that men have over them. That is why, what's her name, Shabalala, Dolly Shabalala's killer, was given not the maximum sentence, because he should have gotten life. But that judge, Karim Musa, said something that no judge in this country has ever said. That what's his name? That guy. Donald. Yeah. Sibulai. Told him that you can't do that. You can't kill a woman just because you feel like it. You see, what about some phony? Or because she doesn't want you. Men who say, if I can't have you, nobody can. You see that? Look at the language. I don't even have to stand here and talk to you about it. I mean, just look at the language. So, marital rape is one of the key unresolved issues in our societies. Raped, harassed, terrorized, even in Dar es Salaam when I was doing my master's there. There was a wall, it was called the punch wall, where males felt that now they couldn't keep women out of education, so they were going to just terrorize them. That's why you have so many. It's not sex. It's violence. It's impunity. It's a weapon that is used to, all right, get out. Go back into that little family unit that is only owned by men, controlled by men, where men can do what? And then he says to her, you see, you're the one who made me beat you, because this sada is not okay. Why not pegile palish ngale ndlela lengithandayo mina? So that's all about controlling, about using impunity, about, violating. And sexual violence, of course, is the most, lots of women get raped. But why rape is so profound is that when you rape someone, the eros, the capacity to love, that's the most powerful. And fulfillment. You see people who are in love, they shine. They shine. Their bodies are soft. And your essence is your erotic zone. You see, that's where your soul is fed. You are mulling. And that is why males use rape. You see, even if men are not taught that you must rape a woman, but all the language leads to rape. Because rape is misogyny, the hatred of women. And you have to hate someone to control them. So misogyny, which is couched in all this language about culture and all that, it's actually what the driver of male power over women. And femicide, of course, is the ultimate killing of a female because she's female. All right. So today it's trafficking. You see, it's prostitution. It's still the buying and selling of, and who buys women's bodies, by the way? It's not other women. You see? So these are the challenges that feminism attempts to engage with and to resolve. And at the center of feminism is the demand for a humanism, a politics of humanism for all humans. That, we all arrive here with that total integrity that is physiological, that is erotic, that is spiritual, that is creative, and we want it back. Not anymore. Because now we have education, we have access to resources, and we can speak for ourselves. So that's what feminism is about. And that's what's going to happen in your course. You will learn about the different ways that women are resisting patriarchy, using the notion of gender as a conceptual tool to explain the details that I didn't go into today. So I don't want to use up all the time. You see now we have very little time because it's up to a little bit, didn't I? Okay, so let's have about 15 minutes of conversation. You know, ask me some questions. I'll try to answer them as quickly as possible. But if you feel the need in your course, for example, so ask me some questions. Tell me how fed up you are with me, that I, you know, demyth.
Earlier on, the introduction part of the lecture, you said...
Why do you think males, the majority, consider feminism a threat? Why do you think so?
We'll come back to it, to what I think our department, it's called women.
See, you don't even know the ministry, the full designation of the ministry.
Women ministry.
Women, children, disability, and...
I'm going to be a bit...
Go, feel free. You know, I'm controversial, so you should be controversial too. Feel free, please. Feel free.
About language, you say that you can't put it in one department. I can speak for a directorate within the Department of Agriculture. Let's say they don't have, but you only have that ministry that is called women located.
That's why the sunset clause in this country was a betrayal. Everybody's agreeing now, isn't it? Because you cannot negotiate with a government that is all the backing of the major imperialist countries in the world, like the Boer state. And then you say you're negotiating a settlement by putting a band-aid, a plaster, on a big gaping wound.
This is closer to nature. That's the anthropological term invented by the Germans to mean the people closer to nature. I'm a native of South Africa. And that is why the European is not an indigenous person of Europe. It's just a European. You are an indigenous person of it. Because indigenous and all of those things, culture and tradition belong only to these people who are closer to nature. These ones don't have a culture. They are... And the beauty of the system is to make these ones believe they have a culture. And then culture must be removed. Beautiful, right? Now, remember we've just said it now. The biggest form of invention, the inventions were done by various people. But the biggest invention of a European man is to invent a story. And that story has to shape everybody. A combination of people, Asian, African, North African, and Greek, which was not European at the time. And the Europeans are... But it's God who says this will be mine, and that one will not be mine. Now, the first way to name is to name these ones. So when Columbus, Iberian Europe, which is now called Spain, and it goes to look for India, where it is known there were a lot of spices and it was a big, they called it Atlantic, but it had a name. Cross this place which is now Atlantic, and end up in what they now called America. You can't. It doesn't. And that is why when it gets lost there, first it doesn't say it gets lost. Because now when it gets there, it doesn't get lost. Then it gets there, it says, I found people here. They're red Indians. Because they are Indians, because I was home to India. But I found them here. They are not audacity, no humility on the part of Christopher Columbus to ask them, who do you call yourself? The same thing after Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape, 1490, 1491.
Columbus was not saying there won't be a recession and a recovery. In fact, he predicts a complete collapse of the economies. Tanzania was difficult for me to say these things when I recorded.
Yeah, you take pictures.
Good afternoon. Hi. Well, you people are so quiet. Okay.
Superior to you, regardless of who you are, just because they live in a white skin. All right? Another key element of patriarchy is impunity. Okay? So impunity is the exercise of behavior that goes outside the boundaries of the conventions of coexistence that humans agree upon. All societies have boundaries so that we can live together. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to live together if we didn't have boundaries, you see. Because you can't just walk into my house and say, you know, get out. I'm taking over your house. You can't. I'm entitled to my space, to my home, to my privacy, all right? It's part of my human integrity, okay? But with colonialism, which is racial supremacy, fed by the ideology of racial supremacy, all right? Whites came here on this continent. I went to Asia and Latin America and, you know, Australasia, and they drove people off their land with a gun and a Bible, right? And they behaved in an impunious manner. And then they made that normal. So today, when Africans in this country say, we want our country back, we want our land back, the Boers say what? There were no people here, right? There were no people. You also came from somewhere else. This is not your land. To reject the demand for the restitution, of dignity and of basic entitlements. It's the same thing. And of course, we know that race and racial supremacy is core to patriarchy, right? It's the same thing when men touch women's bodies and say, oh, ngaksom. Oh, I'm just admiring you. Okay? What's the problem? It's cultural. All right? You've become westernized. It's African for me to admire you. Oh, ngifuna ukuklobola. They even sing the songs. You hear this new nice song. This guy's got a beautiful voice. He says he saw this woman who is so beautiful. Okay? And I'm going to tell you why I'm making reference to this. Because impunity is very central to patriarchy and to the systems of power that patriarchy facilitates for and gives access to particular groups of people. All right? So, patriarchy has core elements to it. All right? It is a universal system of male domination and privilege and power. It functions through an institutional infrastructure that is economic, political, legal, educational, social, religious, and cultural. These are the key elements of patriarchy. And you can go to any society in the world, you will find all these key elements that characterize Japanese patriarchy or Chinese patriarchy or African patriarchy. And let me come back to this issue of there was no patriarchy before colonialism. Our societies were these beautiful societies where women were respected and, you know, women were powerful and we had matriarchies and, okay. And I want to speak to that discourse. But let me just describe the other elements of patriarchy before I do that. The manifestations of patriarchy are supremacy and violence and impunity, privatization and power, the creation of the public-private divide, and the dehumanization of women through gendered exclusion, gendered identities, and the dehumanization of black people through racism and racial ideology and colonization, and the dehumanization of non-heterosexual people, people who have alternative identities, for example. For example, the so-called, what is it called? Curing lesbian women of their lesbianism. What is it called? I mean, think of the horror of that expression. Think of the horror. And the assumption that you can violate somebody to correct them and make them normal. Because you are the norm, you know. And how you conduct your intimacy is the natural thing. Okay? So what is called corrective rape is such a vicious normalization of violence against women and also against males who refuse to conform to the patriarchal stereotypes, to the way, the systems that patriarchal society has put in place. All right? So the claim is that feminism is not African, it's Western, it comes with colonialism, homosexuality comes with colonialism. What else comes with colonialism besides the BMWs and the branded clothes? That is okay. That's not Western. Yeah? The fancy houses, the nice equipment. No, that's okay. We're still African even when we consume that. But when we choose alternative sexual identities, then we become un-African. See? And we need to be brought in line and conform to what is called African. Yeah? And when we say patriarchy is indigenous to Africa, people say, you're crazy. Yeah, that's why we say feminists are crazy. All right? So let me explain. Africa is the home of humankind, right? We all agree. This is where the species evolved into the form that we see today, right? Right? Oh, you're too quiet. I need you to do some, let's imagine ourselves that we are in church and the pastor is saying amen, and everybody's saying amen. All right? Okay. Humans evolved on this continent. On the one hand, I always make it very clear, on the one hand, there are two narratives that bring us to the moment where humans stand up on the continent, right? The one moment is a religiously inspired, concocted moment. It's a narrative, yeah? Where we are told that humans were created by some supreme being called God or Allah or Buddha or Confucius okay? And then humans were dropped into a Garden of Eden, right? And then this supreme being, there you go, your supremacy, already in the divine. Do you see what I'm saying? This being who can never make any mistakes, who can never be wrong, all right? Who's all-powerful, who determines everything that any human being does, and all the living things on this planet. This being, all right, decided that the male, who is the first being who's created by this deity, that this male needs a companion, someone to serve him, provide him with services, bear children for him, breed for him. All right? Be owned by him and controlled by him. Yeah? She's created, but she's created with a flaw. F-L-A-W. Okay? There's an error in her genetic makeup. She's a liar. She's deceitful. She's duplicitous. Can't be trusted. She's a sexual threat to the man. And how is all that discourse encompassed in the apple? That the man is innocent. He's this perfect being that has been created by another one who looks like him, a male, who universally now is white. And then this supreme being creates this companion, but she is a problem because she contaminates and pollutes this perfect male by offering him a bite of the forbidden fruit, an apple. And he bites the apple and is forever rejected by the supreme God who had created him in a perfect image of his likeness. This is the narrative. And so if you translate that narrative into human society, it is a foundational excuse for the surveillance over women, the control of women, okay? The definition of women as duplicitous, as corruptous, as dangerous, all right? In need of management, of being handled, always under the control of the males, yeah? To the extreme extent where even the body parts of women are mauled and mutilated through FGM and through a variety of practices that construct the female body as dangerous. To the language that says, "Ukhulumela futhi lo mama lo. She talks too much. She has too much to say." You know that, right? So that the language is surveillance and control. All right? And then the construction of a perfect companion through this narrative, which is fundamentally religious, Judeo-Western narrative, yeah? Christian Judeo narrative, that the perfect woman is the submissive, docile, all-accepting woman who exists for the pleasure and the purposes of the male. All right? That's the archetype. All right? That's the quintessential, that's the core of the definition of a woman. And that woman is defined as decent. Yabona nje umama onesithembu. Umama oqothile. You see, a real woman, an African woman. So African patriarchal discourse appropriates that stereotype and claims that a woman who is submissive, who knows her place, who makes sure ukuthi baba is happy, has as much of the best as he can, i.e. ensuring his privilege in every way. That is a true African woman. Do you recognize what I'm saying? That is the Judeo-Christian narrative that translates, of course, into the modern Christian discourse around the gendered identities of females and males. The other narrative that brings us to the point where human beings stand up and no longer move on fours is the evolutionary narrative. And that narrative begins with the argument that humans are a species, that we come from a cell, originally we are a cell. And in fact, if you break the human body down to its zero, okay, you know zero is a number, right? You will find a cell. That all living matter on the planet is in essence a cell, right? And that the cell evolves as the planet evolves. You know the Big Bang Theory, right? How the planets and the various bodies of the universe were created. And that at a particular point, after many, many millions, hundreds of millions of years, we begin to look a little bit like this. And we are traveling a journey in time and space as matter. But at a particular point, after many, many, many millions and hundreds of millions of years, we become this thinking matter that has evolved into what we call humans. All right? And it is at the point where we connect our ability to think with the ability to survive and thrive, what we call progress. It's at that point that we become humans. We become a sustainable species. We no longer wait for the rains so that we can collect some seeds and some fruit and, you know, we no longer live precarious existences where we don't know, you know, if we're going to be eaten by the other creatures or not. We create a world, what we call a society, that has infrastructures, that has communication mechanisms, that has a division of labor, that has languages, that has expressions of joy, music, art, all right? But also rituals of mourning. You see, and we create this environment that we call human society. All right? So both of these narratives, the narratives that says we were dropped from the sky in a garden where the males are superior, and the evolutionary narrative that says actually the first humans were females, not males, because males don't procreate. They don't carry the fetus of the species to term. They don't lactate. Okay? They don't have the physicality to reproduce the species. And even when they participate in reproduction, their participation is very messy and very inefficient. They produce millions and millions of useless sperms. Only one can make it. And even that one, it has to be approved of by the female egg. Okay? So the discourse that humans drop from the sky and that the males are perfect and that the females are created for them and that's why it's my job to protect her. You know, I'm the breadwinner. I'm the head of the family. That is a mythical discourse. That is invented as part and parcel of the domination and allocation of power for males through patriarchy. Patriarchy only emerges as a framework for the management of women and human resources and material resources when humans have traveled this long evolutionary journey and we are now able to thrive and reproduce ourselves. Do you understand what I'm saying? Can you see the moment? Okay. Whether you agree with it or not is okay. But I'm here to give you new knowledge. That's my job. To open the world for you. To show you that there are other narratives about who we are and how we got here. And to encourage you, to push you, to think critically out of your comfort zone. Okay? Outside of your masculinity and your femininity. Because these are all human inventions. And they relate to particular phases in the human journey. They're not givens. They're not unchangeables. Because if they were unchangeables, we wouldn't be standing here with electric lights, computers, cell phones, driving cars. We would still be sitting in a cave hoping that the lions won't come in and eat us up at night. You see what I'm saying? So humans are changing and evolving all the time. But the narratives around power and privilege don't change. The narratives remain the same. They're prehistoric. You see? And they are sustained so that they can show up, they can maintain a status quo, which is totally contradictory to almost everything that humans have become. Because we fly to the moon. But we actually believe that women are inferior to men, which is pure bunkum. It's just crazy, but it's real. Okay? So what is it that creates this moment of disruption, of crisis in human society? Because when we are fighting against those, what are those creatures, those dinosaurs, and all the creatures of the night and the day, you know, that were eating humans and we were eating them, right? For many, many millennia. Because Naledi is telling us that, right? And Lucy is telling us that. When we go back archaeologically, that's why archaeology is so important. And when you have time, read the archaeological literature so that you can know the journey, the actual empirical, physical journey that humans have taken. All right? And not just to declare things because somebody told you and actually it's a lie. But to actually inform yourself and ground yourself in a history that is full, that is as complete as possible about who humans are. All right? So let's go to the moment where humans have survived. They're in little clusters, but they are called cephalous societies. These are societies that have no structures and hierarchies of power. They are societies that are coming together, created spontaneously by the need to survive. What the birds do, they flock, right? Okay, they have some structure because it's very mathematically calculated. It reflects the intelligence of avians, all right? So even with us, up till the moment where we consciously, as humans, create particular infrastructures through which we live, yeah, through which we feed ourselves, through which we relate, we are these groups of humans who are just trying to survive. Males and females have not become the males and females that we become after the moment when humans create surplus. All right? So the key to understanding patriarchy is to go back to the moment. This moment happens at various times in different societies. You see, because some societies are agrarian, others, you know, are more pastoralist, others are more fruitarian, depending on the environmental conditions within which humans as bands, okay, early live. We know that, of course, humans evolved here, then we moved north towards what is called now the Mediterranean Sea, what is today the Middle East. Actually, that sea was just like, we could just wade across it. It was not a sea. We also know that the planet was a total mass, and then it cracked. And you had what is it called when the planet cracked? And had the different continents. Okay? So, but before that, humans moved. And the first great migrations out of Africa were towards India, what is called India today, and those mountains that Hannibal was riding his elephants over. What are they called? The Alps. Okay? And then they move into the Caucasus. Caucasus. Those are the northern European mountains of today. Now, look at the word Caucasus. There's a very important racial term that comes from there. Caucasian. Caucasian. So the people who settled in the Caucasus became what are today known as Caucasians. You know that the Caucasus cut across the north of India. That is why there are Indians who believe that they are Aryans. The ones with the blue eyes. You meet Indians with blue eyes and green eyes who look like dubabs. They look like kaburus, but they are darker. You see? So the movement of humans across the planet defined also the moments of surplus production, the moment when humans transformed themselves, okay, into the kinds of humans that we are today. And in some societies, it took longer. In others, it was very quick. And it's called uneven development in political economy. The theory of uneven development. It doesn't mean that another group is less than another. It just means that the progress into the future, the movement forward of humans is uneven. It doesn't mean that people who didn't invent cars and were still using donkeys or camels are less than those who drive cars. Unless, of course, you bring racial supremacy, then, of course, the societies of what are called the South become underdeveloped, undeveloped. You see what I'm saying? And then the societies of the North become civilized and superior. But that moment of surplus production is the crucial moment when patriarchy emerges. Why? Because that is the moment when humans acquire a consciousness. Okay? It's the moment when thinking matter, the use of our brains to think, to be creative, to transform our worlds, that moment humans acquire a consciousness which we call agency. Agency. The ability to define the trajectory of your life, to define your destiny. All humans in those moments acquire that consciousness. All right? So you see, for example, the women start to collect seeds and bulbs and tubers, you see, and they bring them into the settlements that humans are creating because they realize that nature is very haphazard. It may not rain. So they bring the seeds in and they become the first agriculturalists. Oh, I'm very sorry that you missed the first part of this lecture. Because now you're not going to know where we came from. Huh? Okay. Are we all together? Okay. So when you apply a feminist lens to history, because feminism centers women in the narrative about who humans are, and feminism sets out to create her story, not his story. Because you can look at the words, they'll tell you a lot. His history. Do you see? History is his story. And in fact, if you look at all the courses that Tamale is offering, with the exception of this one, it's about what men did. How the men led liberation movements, how the men, judges, how the men are policy makers, how the men are the thinkers, the great scholars of Africa, Nyerere, Nkrumah, etc. Okay? But you have to, you know what? In terms of protocol, Baba, you're a consultant. You're supposed to just sit and watch and listen and assess. So I'm going to deny you the assumption that you made that because you are somewhere in the Tamale hierarchy that you can intervene whenever you want. Are we okay? Thank you. So, what feminism does is that it retrieves. Are you okay? You're uneasy. It's okay. We're going to have question time. Don't worry. You know, this is a good sign. It means ukuthi uyangizwa. Lento engikhulumayo iyangena. Angithi? Iyahlaba. Iyahlala, yes. Ayihlale vele. Sifuna ukuthi ihlale ngoba we want the change. We want the new humanism. We want the new Africa. We want the inclusion. We want the whole power of Africa. We don't want to waste it on old feudal practices, you know, that are outmoded, you know, and that are killing women, all right, and children, wasting our resources on this continent. All right. So, feminist history becomes history, telling the story of who women are, where we come from in this long journey of the humans, okay, and the struggles, okay, and the systems, and the discourses. So, for example, the discourse around agriculture claims that men are the main farmers, isn't it? In fact, the images show men, the Cro-Magnon man and the Neanderthal, the early man, and everything is man. People even tell you, man means everybody. I'm like, no. I'm a woman. I'm not a man. Why do you want to subsume me into a language, a word that is about a male? Oh, history is about everybody. No, it's not. Actually, history is about his story. The narration of who men have been and are and will hopefully become. Okay. So, in history, the history of agriculture, women are the first agriculturalists. Women are the first to pick those seeds, bring them to the settlement, and create an agricultural division of labor. This is the first productive exercise that humans engage in beyond just throwing a spear at a buck that is passing. All that stuff, that narrative that shows men in charge of the human history, that they're the ones who brought back Kampala. No, no. That is a mythification of the true narrative about who humans are. And the first agriculturalists are women. Why? Because females carry the species, all right? So, this is one of the first tasks that women perform on behalf of the community of humans and for themselves, because they are sedentary a lot of the time of the year. And in that sedentary status, they can actually plant. So the creative thinking mind is applied to strengthening human survival, strengthening human existence, you see, and creating some kind of security, what is called food security today, all right? But the notion of food security today is so far away from what we think security should be, yeah? It's about big white farmers with tractors and fertilizers and ammonia, killing the earth and producing genetically modified, maize that black people eat, and their children and them, they acquire this diabetes, which is the new industry for the big pharmaceuticals. But the initial process of agriculture is one of the earliest examples of how humans create a division of labor, right? With the females growing the food. After the emergence of patriarchy, and I'm going to go back and forth to show you, this activity of the women becomes re-narrated as a natural function that women undertake. That's why when you look at the statistics on this continent, women are naturally subsistence farmers. Not commercial. Naturally subsistence farmers. Their job is to feed their families, right? They are the rurals. And they have remained in the same position that they were hundreds and hundreds of years ago, with no development of the technology, the precarity of drought and rain-fed cropping, and just basically the marginalization and exclusion from the progress that human society has made. Any progress in agriculture is controlled and owned and driven by males. And now it's linked with profit and commodity circulation. All right? But this moment is very significant for us as humans. Because when humans create a division of labor, all right, we create the conditions for the rise of power. All right? For the emergence of power. Up till that moment, when humans are not engaging in productive activity, they are scattered depending on nature, depending on the rain, depending on whether they survive. But when they create those communities and they settle down and they begin to divide the labor, you see the first opportunity for power to be invented. The invention of power, because power is invented. It's not natural. Like you can step out and eat litunduluga or, you know, some indigenous fruit. No. Power is a human invention. And it's embedded in the existence of particular conditions. When the white man comes here with his gun and his Bible and he takes that land, he creates the conditions for him to have power over African people, isn't it? Yeah. So the creation of a division of labor in human society is the first opportunity for power to emerge. And how does it emerge? Males also use their creativity. And they realize that the female body has everything that they need to have power. Everything. Okay? It works. It labors. Right? You can just look across this continent. People will not argue with you when you say women work the hardest, the longest, for the least. Right? It breeds, reproduces the species. All you have to do is put a little sperm in there. And then she does everything for 9 months. Births, raises, feeds, makes sure it survives, and it's yours. So they breed. Right? They provide sexual pleasure. It's a service that men need and want and assume that it comes with the female body, right? That is why heterosexuality is normalized. Not that some God in the sky told you that, you know, having sex with a woman as a man is the normal thing to do. No. Historically, sex is directly related to reproduction, breeding, and also to sexual pleasure. And this female body is very creative, has management skills, is creating a division of labor, producing food around the settlement, developing languages, many skills and creativities that this female body has. And male bodies also have creativities and skills, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the moment when the female body is recognized as a source of power. So, how do you invent this power? You own and control that body. You define that body as yours. All right? You construct it as belonging to the male. So you put in place narratives about how natural it is for women to breed, natural it is for women to provide sex, natural it is for women to be subservient, to be controllable, you know, an uncontrollable woman is a problem. All right? And you ensure that this female doesn't exercise her autonomy by putting in place rituals and practices in which all men participate to control and own the female. So what you call culture and tradition are actually rituals and practices that emerge at the moment when males recognize the power of the female body. And that is the first property that emerges in human society. Women are the first commodity. All right? And how do you control and own this body? You do two things. You collude with other males, and you agree that a woman has to belong to a male. The father, initially when she's born, the one who becomes called a father, you institute the patriarchy. A patriarch is a male who is in charge of females and young males. That's what a patriarch is. And this notion of the patriarchy and the patriarch develops in this little unit that humans form, the first institution that humans create, called the heterosexual family. And do you know, up till today, women cannot create that family. Legally, a woman cannot marry a man. It's a man who marries a woman, right? I made her a decent woman. So that little unit becomes institutionalized. The practices, the most backward, repressive, and violent, impunitive practices in our societies happen in this little unit called the family, the heterosexual family, where men reign supreme. You see, they own this unit. They create legal systems that give them the power over whoever is in this unit. They construct narratives and language that says, I'm the head of the family. It's natural, they tell you. How can I be dominated by a woman, Mina? So the notion of masculinity, of control, of ownership, linking discourses of power, surveillance, to physicality, right down to what men eat. They eat the most protein in the families, because protein, we were talking about laughing and how laughing is an expression of dis-ease, because we're talking about some very serious stuff. So protein consumption is, because humans are very smart. When you eat protein, you build your body and you build your bones and you build your size. All right? And males eat most protein. In fact, if you look at the images of males in human history, they're always either sitting around a pot of meat, or they are carrying some animal that they've killed. And even when you, if you have roasting, right, which is one of the earliest forms of cooking, the men eat the meat, the women eat the bones and the soup. Yes. The best meat. I come from a family that is very, very, very African. You see, I can tell you straight, I know. Because I grew up on a farm. I'm indigenous as somebody who has a darker skin than me and whose hair is a little bit curlier. The fact of the matter is that patriarchy, and African patriarchy in particular, is deeply embedded in systems of privileging, you know, and of power and control. So this system is not viable if it only happens in small units, isn't it? It has to be consolidated, and it has to be become the nucleus of a society, right? So, as humans create value, that ability to now no longer depend on the rain, but to grow your own food, to dry your meat, to collect the seeds, etc., right? Then when you have surplus, it means you have extra. You no longer are desperately trying to survive, right? So surplus has significance not only for what happens to women and men and the emergence of the heterosexual family, but it also has resonance. It cascades into the larger scheme of things, the history of humans, because surplus is the basis of exchange. So people who are living in neighboring communities who have salt, they now come over and do barter, isn't it? Barter. But barter is not commodity exchange. Barter is the exchange of use values, things that you use every day. You still don't have a market, all right? You just share, you know, you say your neighbor has more madumbas than you have, your potato crop is better. So you barter, all right? But for this economy to become an economy, for this society to have an economy, you have to have exchange, all right? Exchange. That's the next step after the creation of surplus. And the first exchange is of who? Who's the first one to become an exchange commodity? The female. Because the female has all these values, these capacities. The female breeds, the female labors, the female is creative, and the female provides sexual privileges and services. So the exchange of women between units that are owned by men, controlled by men, and the privatization of women's bodies and their offspring is the next stage in the human narrative. And so this exchange becomes dressed in rhetoric, language and practices and rituals and ceremonies that claim that this is not the same exchange as when I take my donkey to the public square and I exchange it for a goat. No. The narrative that is developed, called culture and traditions, is that, oh, Shatandana, our families are strengthening ties. You know, we're just strengthening the relationships between these two units that men own. And the women are moving between these two units, you know, because of love or because of a deal. If there's a drought, I've got lots of donkeys and cattle, you see, and you've got lots of daughters. You want to eat during the drought? That's exchange. So the exchange in humans is the first expression of commodity exchange in human history. And the humans that are exchanged are females, right? Because they have a reproductive, laboring, intellectual, and sexual capacity, all right? Now, people say, yeah, but how do you know? Because this exchange is the cell of the market. This is the first market in human history, in the narrative about humans. And how does it happen? How is it undertaken? Through equivalence. Because exchange does not occur without equivalence. You say, I can take this bottle of water and say to you, My brother, give me your computer, I'll give you this water. You say, oh, isn't it? They're not equal. Yabon. Give me something that has equal value. Now, when humans had settled, began to create settlements, to create an agricultural division of labor, bringing the seeds in and all that, they also domesticated other living things. Dogs, pigs, cattle, sheep, goats. Those animals that we know now as domesticated animals, right? And if you've been listening to me carefully, you will see why equivalence is so important in explaining ilobolo. That it's not just about families liking each other, it's a cultural practice. That it's actually an activity of exchange. Because what is used in the exchange for women in this region? Cattle, cows, isn't it? Cows. Now look at the cow and look at the female. They both breed and lactate. They both labor. Okay, the cow doesn't provide sexual services unless you're a deviant, you know. All right? They have equivalents. You can exchange them. And as the class societies emerge, richer people who used war, for example, to accumulate, and when they went to war, because that's how the state emerges, and the state is necessary now to manage this emergence of surplus and the growth of surplus and the tensions and the contestations. So they invent the idea of divinity, that I have natural rights to take everything. So you have your chiefs emerging who claim that they come from a long line of parasites who own and control the rhetoric that we are divinely chosen by a supreme God so they can exercise supremacy over the other people. Demand that they must be subjugated and kneel in front of them and pay homage. Yabon. Because they are divinely given this task. All right? So war becomes a powerful means of accumulation, and in wars, the earliest wars that humans, now they don't do it anymore, but because war has changed so much. But war is still about mineral resources. The Americans go to war for mineral resources, right? But if you take it back millions of years ago when humans were starting wars, using wars, because we invented war, to accumulate. And who was taken first? The children and the women, the young women. The old ones was, no use. No sex, no breeding, useless, a burden to, walk all that distance back home. But the young females and the children and the small boys, the males who were of fighting age and older were slaughtered. So women became booty in the plunder that males engaged in to create a state that has infrastructures that give privilege through divine rhetorics, all right, through the ownership of land, the control of land, and the development of an ideology, a language that is passed on for millions and millions of years, that some people are better than others, that some people are superior to others. That's why I said supremacy is at the core of patriarchy. And it manifests itself in many ways. But the most fundamental form of supremacy is when women are told that you are less than a male. That when you were created to serve the man, and then of course they invent the Bible, and they use that narrative about the rib, and you can see the persistence of these discourses in maintaining these systems of privilege and power. That is why African men don't want to give up the patriarchy, baby. It's just too sweet there in the power. You see, because no class, no group of people ever gives up power willingly. No group of people ever, I don't care, you know, whether they can squirm or what, the inevitability that power will change cannot be, you know, removed. Things will change. Power will change. That's why I'm standing here as a radical feminist telling you this. You see? And why a lot of us, all of us, feel uneasy with it. Because if you look at this practice of ukulobola, in many countries, societies, it's called bride price. What is a price? It's a tag, isn't it? When you go to a shop, you ask, how much? When you arrange ilobolo, the males go to the other males, isn't it? And then they talk. Hey, ngamfundisa mina lo mntwana. She's got a PhD. I spent a lot of money on this girl. Or if she's coming from the royals, the divine parasites, you know. Hey, umntana inkosi. You see, she's special. You have to pay. Inkomo is more. Now, I don't understand. How can people sustain the claim ukuthi ilobolo and the exchange of women is just good relationships between people? What is that? How can you sustain an argument like that? It's sustainable because in the creation of patriarchy, females are so hampered, so constrained, so closed in through the creation of the domestic arena, through the creation of the public-private divide, that women are taught that they belong in the private, not corporations, the private that is owned by men, the private that can only be created by a man. Because when those men create those states, those infrastructures, the law is for men. The men are the ones who write the law. They're the ones who are the judges. It's only now that we've been insisting that, hey, this is also about us, Pela, that you see women judges. But in every judicial system in this world, males are the owners of the law. Okay? And it is the law that inscripts in the society that a woman is the private property of a male. Why is she the private property? Because when you engage in exchange, you create the notion of private property. So when I buy my car, it's private property, isn't it? I pay for it, I drive it home. It's my private property. If somebody steals it, I can go to the police and say, my property has been stolen, isn't it? So the notion of property travels side by side with commodification, with exchange. And as the market expands from the little heterosexual unit to the larger social environment, it becomes the dominant feature of our societies. It's directly linked with class rule, class accumulation, and with race. So as humans travel along this journey, we create all the infrastructures that justify the ownership, excessive ownership, you know, of property, using masculinity and gender, using race and whiteness, using heteronormativity, you see, using ability, that they kill babies who are not born normal. For a long time, twins. If a woman gave birth to twins, there was this superstition that twins were dangerous. It was abnormal. And all of this was meant to stabilize the system of patriarchy, to trim it and calibrate it so that it functions for a particular group of people who physiologically look in a certain way, all right? Sometimes who are even a certain height. For example, you couldn't be a police officer in the colonial as a black person. A black man, you had to be a certain height to be a police officer. You see? So, I mean, all these elements, basic elements that create and sustain a system that excludes the majority of people and that provides security for a small clique of people. And then, of course, when you bring race in and it intersects, then you can see how it applies to African people, When you bring gender in, you can see how it applies to women and girls. Yeah? But the core of patriarchy is that it is an unjust, unequal, destructive system. And all its elements show us class rule. One person owns 10 farms and the rest of us live in shacks on the margins of those farms. And how does he control you? With a gun and the state and the law and his whiteness and his media and his language. In a family, what are called families, males own the families.